Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar that is part of our Tulane Talks for new students and families. The topic tonight is sex and healthy relationships, respect, consent, and care. And we're so glad that you've joined us. This is the second topic in this special series. And I am Penny Wyatt. I'm the Director of Parent Programs, and I'll be moderating the webinar. I am so pleased to introduce you to our panelists. They're wonderful colleagues of mine, and all together they form just a great team to provide resources and support and education in this whole area. So first I'll introduce Julia Broussard, who is our Interim Assistant Provost for Title IX.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here tonight.
And next is Alison Cofrancesco, who is or will be very soon, our Director of Case Management and Victim Support Services. Alison has already been here in the Assistant Director role, and she'll be assuming that Director position July 1. So Alison.
Hi, welcome everyone.
And next is Alicia Czachowski, and she is our Director of Public Health Initiatives and Assessment.
Hello everyone, nice to see you this evening.
Next is Jennifer Hunt, who's the Assistant Director for the Well for Health Promotion.
Good evening.
And last but certainly not least is Christopher Zacharda, who is our Director of the Office of Student Conduct.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
So now I will turn things over to our first presenter, Julia Broussard, and then I'll rejoin everyone when we get to the question and answer section.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to just give you a little brief overview of what the Title IX office does and the role we play on campus. So we're dedicated to ensuring gender equity in our campus community and a campus community free from sexual harassment and misconduct. As you may have gathered from our name, we focus on ensuring that Tulane's compliant with laws like Title IX, as well as the Violence Against Women Act. And under Title IX, Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, which includes harassment and discrimination on the basis of someone's sex, their gender identity, and their sexual orientation. It also bars forms of sexual harassment, including sexual assault, intimate partner violence, stalking, and sexual exploitation. And so under Title IX, we have an obligation to respond to any reports we receive of these types of harassment, discrimination, or violence. Victims and respondents, which is the term we use for accused students, have rights that entitle them to really specific types of support. And Alison is going to talk a lot more about that. And they have procedural rights when a formal report gets made to the university. And Chris will talk with y'all more about that. Similarly, the Violence Against Women Act also requires that we provide support to student victims, and it requires that we engage in education and prevention work with our community. And Alicia and Jennifer are also going to talk more about that. And so hopefully you're starting to see how all of our areas really connect. You know, we really embrace coordination in making this work happen at Tulane. This is not work that our office could easily do on our own. We're definitely, like I said, keeping an eye on everything to make sure that we're complying with these laws and engaging in best practices. But we work very closely with our campus partners to ensure these different pieces. So in our kind of day-to-day work, our office is reviewing each and every report we get at the university that contains any allegations of sex discrimination or sexual harassment or sexual violence or misconduct. We're looking at those to ensure that each case is appropriately responded to, that victims, respondents, and other affected students are being connected with support, that we're complying with all of the laws and regulations around procedural requirements for how we investigate and adjudicate those cases. And then we're also keeping a broader eye towards trends that may be occurring on campus. So if we're starting to see a large number of reports coming from a certain area on campus, that may be a sign for us that there's a broader climate issue there that we need to step in and address. And in that vein of monitoring the campus climate, our office also oversees our campus climate surveys. If you joined our webinar earlier this semester that Penny's office hosted, you may have heard from some of us on this call about our big climate survey that launched in the spring. Our office works to support the prevention efforts on campus, and we engage in a lot of education and training for faculty, staff, and students around Title IX and the university's response to incidents. And finally, we're here as a resource for members of the campus community who have feedback about our policies and processes or have ideas for different initiatives we could be implementing to either improve our response process or improve our education and prevention. Ultimately, our office's goal is to ensure that impacted members of our community get support and that we're creating a community that's based on consent and respect that's ultimately going to be free from violence and harassment. And I'm happy to pass it over, I believe, to Alison or Chris now. Chris.
Thank you, Julia. So again, I'm Dr. Zacharda. I'm the Director of Student Conduct here at Tulane. And a little bit about our office and our role in this topic. So the Office of Student Conduct cultivates personal growth and social responsibility by guiding students to understand the impact of their behaviors and their choices. And we do that through helping students understand, explore, and then ultimately abide by the tenets of our Code of Student Conduct. So our Code of Student Conduct is publicly available. I always encourage all students and their families to make sure that they understand the Code of Student Conduct. It outlines our behavioral expectations for all of our students, regardless of age, regardless of program. Our expectation is that our students are being good students, that they're being good representatives of Tulane, and that they're engaging in intellectual discourse and behaviors that are supporting that educational aim for themselves and for their peers, for others. And so that Code of Student Conduct is what helps those students stay in that lane. The code also outlines not only the 37 specific prohibited kinds of behaviors that students should never engage in, but then it also outlines the processes by which the students will resolve those concerns, those complaints with the university. So that conduct process, which is outlined in our Code of Student Conduct, does also include those instances where students have been accused of some sort of sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. Again, as Julia had described, the university does have some requirements and expectations about how we resolve those. And so for the purposes of student conduct in this topic, there's really 5 main behaviors that are related to sexual misconduct or sexual harassment that are outlined in our code. They include sexual assault, sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, stalking, and sexual exploitation. And when a student files a complaint against another student, then that conduct process, those processes are available to those students in order to resolve that conflict. It is important to note, and this will come up in other presentations as well, that there are amnesty provisions embedded in our process in which students don't have to fear, well, I don't want to come forward because I don't want the university to find out that I was drinking underage or that I was smoking marijuana. We do offer certain amnesty protections so that those students don't have to fear getting in trouble. They can still come forward and be given that amnesty and not face repercussions for, again, those violations like drug or alcohol violations. So that amnesty provision is really important. And we hope that you as parents can make sure that students understand the totality of the university's expectations as it relates to behavioral misconduct. When it comes down to specific complaints of sexual misconduct, the path forward, there are 2 main ways to resolve them. We have an informal resolution process, which we call an alternative dispute resolution. And that it offers students a lot of flexibility in how they're asking the university to resolve this complaint. And that can include things like online consent workshops, a partnership that we've developed with Jennifer Hunt in the Well as other educational opportunities or wellness opportunities, or exploring substance abuse or other assessments, exploring other mental health assessments. So there's really a lot of opportunities in those informal resolutions in which ultimately both students or all parties would agree to the terms of that resolution. Now, for those cases where an informal resolution either is not an option because neither or one of the parties is not interested, we do have a formal investigation process as well. And that is outlined in detail in our Code of Student Conduct. And that process that is outlined, which Julia helps us make sure that we're in compliance with. And so it is in compliance with Department of Education regulations, including Title IX, VAWA, as well as some others. The formal investigation process is going to be impacted about depending on where the incident happened. So if the incident happened on campus, then there is a specific live hearing component in which students would participate in a live hearing with cross-examination. For those allegations that happened off campus or that wouldn't fall under the formal definition of Title IX, again, which is dictated by the Department of Education, then there is a slightly different investigative process for our non-Title IX sexual misconduct major matter investigations. Regardless of which path, informal or informal, or Title IX investigation or non-Title IX investigation, students are allowed to have advisors, support helping them. That can include attorneys, that could include family members or parents, that could include some faculty or staff that we have trained to be specialists in that. And then it also includes case management and victim support services. They also have support, whether they're going through as the accused student, which we would refer to as the respondent, or as the individual that is accusing another student. We refer to those individuals as complainants. They all receive support from case management and victim support services, and they all have rights that are outlined in the Code of Student Conduct as well. So with that, I think that's an appropriate segue. I'll turn it over to Alison to talk a little bit more about case management and victim support services.
Thank you. So with case management and victim support services, we help students who just need extra support. We help with a range of issues. It could be, short-term accommodations, transition to college, family emergencies, academic concerns. That's kind of more of the case management side of things. But then the other piece, the really large piece that we do is victim support, which can include, victims of sexual violence. And if a student is a victim of sexual violence, we really just want to make sure that they feel supported, to know that they are not alone in this. I think that, there's typically a lot of questions that come up, a lot of confusion, a lot of, not knowing kind of where to go or how to navigate. And so that's sort of where our office really tries to support students through the process and kind of let them know what options are available to them, whether that's reporting or seeking medical help, whether that's academic accommodations, or just a variety of other issues that come up. Our main goal is really just to be with them and to support them through that process. In addition, we also provide support to respondents or the accused student, because that kind of comes with its own sort of set of anxieties and own set of issues. So again, I think, if a student experiences, any type of sexual violence, they, again, just are sometimes just need help navigating the university and navigating kind of, next steps. So that's kind of where we come in and try to make sure that they have the support and the resources, whether it's on campus or off campus, the resources that they need to move forward. So that's a little bit about our office. I will pass it off to Jennifer.
I am actually going to let Alicia get us started.
I'm sorry.
And then I'm going to go right into it. But you were right. We're next.
No worries. Hello, everyone. So before Jennifer goes into a little bit more about what the Welfare Health Promotion does, I'm going to talk a bit about All In, which is Tulane's commitment to end all forms of sexual violence. So about 4 years ago, a group of staff from across Tulane got together and really started working on a comprehensive, collaborative plan to provide more education, prevention, and information to students around sexual violence prevention, including many of the people that you are seeing on your screens tonight. I'm not going to go through every single goal and objective that we have gone through over the last 4 years. I'm going to highlight a few things that might be particularly salient to you and your students as they're starting. All In does have a website, and on this website, you will find links to all of the different departments that do work in this area on both sexual violence prevention and sexual violence response. Also information for if your student or you have somebody come to you saying that they are a survivor of sexual violence, how to provide support for that person, as well as how to report if you in fact are a survivor of sexual violence. And we keep it updated so that you can get information about events coming up and any other information that we think might be really helpful for students to be aware of while they're in school here. There's a wide array of educational initiatives that will also, Jennifer will be talking about quite a few of them, but they come out of a variety of offices, not just our offices or the folks that are on here tonight. We partner with athletics, fraternity and sorority programs, residential life, the Center for Intercultural Life, and each of these areas have many educational and prevention initiatives that come out of them. Another thing that might be really helpful for you to be aware of is we have a number of different coalitions that bring together staff, faculty, and students from across campus to do work on these issues. So it's a great way for students to then connect with us as staff on campus if they're interested in working around sexual violence prevention and response. And finally, there is actually a set student coalition. And these students get together. Actually, Jennifer and Julia lead this coalition and do a lot of comprehensive work on sexual violence prevention for the student body. And each year they sponsor Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April. So that's kind of an overarching view of what the institution and student affairs have been doing. But now I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer so she can talk a little bit more about what the Welfare Health Promotion is doing.
Thanks so much for having us here tonight. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Welfare Health Promotion and then the various types of prevention that we provide at Tulane and give a couple of examples of what you might see while your students here that fall under each type of program. So the Welfare Health Promotion is, to just put it really simply, we're the health educators on campus. So we educate college students around a variety of issues that might impact their health and well-being during their time at Tulane and beyond. So things like alcohol and drug use, stress and sleep, mental health and well-being, sexual health, and sexual violence prevention. And we're going to really talk about the sexual health and sexual violence prevention work that we do, but we cover a variety of topics, and we really try not to silo any one of those issues, because we know if something's affecting your health in one area, it's likely going to affect your health and well-being in other areas as well. So that's what the Welfare Health Promotion does. We're a small but mighty team of about 7 people who work in a variety of different topics around this area, and we try to be as interactive and available and accessible to students as possible. So your students might be interacting with us regularly throughout campus, or our hope is that they are. So when we conceive of sexual violence prevention, we kind of conceive of it in a couple of different areas. And what we think about is the life cycle of a Tulane student. So where are the touch points that we have access to kind of instill resources and knowledge in students that will help them make better decisions around their health. And we think about how their needs might change over time. So the needs of somebody just coming in as an 18, 19-year-old might look really different when it comes to health and well-being of a 22-year-old that's about to graduate and go into the next steps of their lives. So we try to consider that. And to do that, we build out education in a couple different spheres. So one is really curricular. And what that looks like is consistent education that each Tulane student is going to receive throughout the tenure their time here. So in the realm of sexual health and sexual violence prevention, that might look like your pre-matriculation courses that cover sexual health for students, sexual literacy for students, sexual misconduct for students. And those are things, again, that all students are going to go through during their time here. Similarly, orientation will have elements of this. All students will go through that. And then we also have curricular integrations where a majority of students will go through. So we work really closely with the fraternity and sorority life to integrate bystander intervention, sex education, consent programming into their potential new member series, which touches 70% of Tulane students. So we really try to kind of look at this as a curriculum that students go through. And then we also have more kind of programming. These are things that might not be something that every single Tulane student access, but we try to give a lot of different and diverse options for students to get involved, to come in and learn, to access information however they see fit. So those kinds of programs might look like Sex Week. Those might be requestable workshops on sexual health or sexual violence prevention. That might be like Body Respect Week or menstruation celebration. These are kind of signature programs that we try to bring students in to get information about these topics. And then finally, like Alicia was mentioning, we focus a lot on peer education. So we really recognize that peers are some of the most meaningful educators for any group of people. That's true for 40-year-olds as well as 18-year-olds. We like to hear from our peers about information that might impact us. And so we spend a lot of time investing in our various student organizations like SAFEs, TUFs, but also student organizations that we don't necessarily advise, but are absolutely working on sexual violence prevention work, and making sure that they're resourced, trained, educated, and empowered to make impacts around these various topics in their own spheres. So within the welfare health promotion, we have the TUFs, the Tulane peer health educators, who do bystander intervention and some sexual health education. And then we have the SAFEs, which stands for sexual aggression peer hotline and education. And they're really peer advocates who provide both response for survivors of sexual violence, but they also really work on prevention education around campus. So that's in a nutshell some of the ways that we're trying to implement sexual violence prevention on campus, but I'm sure you might have some questions or you might want more information about various topics, and I'm happy to fill more in.
And I'll just show this list that is not exhaustive, but there's many more things than this, but this highlights some of those things that you just heard about. And when a student will receive some of this education, they'll learn more through these different pieces and parts of what we offer. So Alicia or Jennifer, do you have anything else you would want to add or explain about any of the particular things on here? I think you all touched on everything that's in the list, but I just thought I would ask before we start taking questions. So
I think we could talk all day about some of this, about these bullet points, quite honestly. All of us could, I think. And so if there's maybe particular programs that parents have questions on, we could maybe go there first.
So parents and students that we have with us, please feel free to submit your questions now in the Q&A field on your screen, and we'll start to take those. I think I'll go back to this slide so you can see that list, because that might prompt particular questions if there's something you want to learn more about. And then you will get this, the slides for this. You'll be able to access this from the Parent Programs website, and those different departments websites will be hyperlinked there. So if you want to learn more about the arenas in which each of these folks works, then you can find out more that way. So please submit your questions. We're happy to take those. I don't see any questions yet, so I'll just ask all the presenters if there's anything you'd like to go back and elaborate on a little bit more, or something that we didn't mention you'd like to highlight.
I'll expand on one point. So I had talked about there are some requirements from the Department of Education as it relates to Title IX adjudication that Julia and I wrestle with every day in terms of making sure that our processes, our policies, and our support is in compliance with federal guidelines. We do expect within the next, probably the next, I'll say 6 to 12 months, that is a bit of a moving target, that we do anticipate that the Department of Education under the Biden and Cardozo administration will be releasing some significant changes that would impact our Code of Student Conduct in the future. Because we anticipate that those regulations won't be changing before the start of the fall semester, we will be operating under the same sexual misconduct and major matter investigation for Title IX and non-Title IX processes that we've been utilizing for the last 2 years. Again, those are outlined in our Code of Student Conduct, and the code will be published later this summer, usually at the end of July or beginning of August is when we get the following code year publicly released for parents and families and students.
So I'll start to take a couple of the questions, and I want to start on the answer for this first one and let my colleagues chime in. So one of the questions is, how do students access your services? And so if you look back at this list, I'll explain a little bit more about what we mean by that. So some of this education they are getting before they even arrive. So your students are getting a series of e-newsletters that are called the Navigator, and those come out about twice a month. And they will drop in articles that mention some of the upcoming programs or remind them of some of the things they need to do before they arrive. So for instance, one of the things on the new student checklist is that they recommend, it's highly encouraged that students carefully read the Code of Student Conduct over the summer. One of the other elements that they will do is a set of online education modules that they have to do over the summer. So they are getting information pushed out to them about those. And you'll see in that second bullet point, those are the topics of those different modules. So even before they arrive, they're guided through, it's just sort of a self-guided education module on these different topics: sexual health for students, sexual literacy, and sexual misconduct prevention. They are invited to these Tulane Talks webinars. We are, our goal for this is to educate all of you so you can have further conversations with your student before they even get here. And then the other way that they'll access some of this is through things that are intentionally designed for them in new student orientation, which starts from move-in to August 21st, right before school starts. So they have a first floor meeting where they get the Code of Conduct, they review some elements of that. They start having some of this all-in programming to understand what constitutes sexual violence and learn how to prevent that. And then as they are just here living with us, going through everything and being a student here, and they start to see some of these other things. So the programs that Jennifer was talking about, it's just sort of all around them. So there's a lot of outreach that happens. There are formal programs, there's training that's provided for certain student groups. As Jennifer mentioned, I'll tell parents that one thing that was decided many, many years ago is that there is a statement that professors are expected to list in their course syllabus about resources for anyone who's experienced sexual assault. So it directs students to the offices and these people here that you've met tonight. And so, in every course syllabus, there is some guidance there. And it was just deemed important enough to educate the whole campus about that they wanted to put it somewhere where students are always going to see it. Another place where they'll always see things is that in the bathrooms, the restrooms on campus, there are stickers on the mirrors that also have some of this information. So know that, from these daily things that they might see to those important resources for their courses, they're going to be continually reminded about these things. So I'll let my other colleagues mention other ways that students can access the services. And I think maybe it would be good to start with Alison to just maybe explain a little bit more about how a student might get connected with your staff.
Sure. So students get connected in a variety of different ways. They can certainly just call or walk into our office, and we are happy to talk to them. We have walk-in hours that are scheduled daily. Additionally, we receive a lot of our referrals from our concern report, which is tulane.edu/concern. And anybody can access that, faculty, staff, students, community members, and just let us know that they might be concerned about something, or they may, a student might refer themselves, or a parent might refer their student. And basically just say, I would like for you to check in, or let us know about something that might have happened on campus, and then we will reach out to students. But certainly, we talk to parents all the time. They're welcome to call and talk to a case manager. Your students are welcome to, walk in as well. So we're a pretty open office. I will say, and something I didn't actually note before, is that I just wanted to mention that we do have an on-call service, which is a 24-hour, 24/7 service. So it's always staffed by somebody that's on campus. And then, we also have people that are off campus that will respond to incidents. So if there is some sort of emergency, that we do have that on-call service, which activates, different responses. And, we then check in with students kind of depending on what the situation is, and make sure that they're safe and that they have, immediate support. So just wanted to note that as well.
Jennifer, could you talk about how SAFE operates to, guide students to resources, and the difference between how things might proceed if a student reaches out to SAFE versus going first to perhaps, Alison's office?
So first, I'll give a little context for how SAFE operates, and then I'll answer that question about the difference. So SAFE is slightly unique. There are some other collegiate organizations like this, but but they are unique in that they really function as a 24/7 advocacy hotline. And so they are available 24/7 in the fall and spring semester. So as long as school is in session, they are available via a hotline that we make available throughout campus. It's available online. They learn about it at orientation, et cetera. And folks can call that number, and a peer advocate who has gone through the same kind of training and the same number of hours as somebody who works at a rape crisis center like New Orleans Family Justice Center in town. They have received the same training, and they're going to be able to respond with support and referrals to resources in those situations. So SAFEs are not by any means mental health professionals or professional crisis interventionists, but they absolutely are very well trained to provide students with referrals to various on-campus and off-campus resources to help explain how to navigate processes. The students maybe would think that they might want to reach out to CMDSS, but they're kind of intimidated by figuring out how to do that. SAFE can really explain that and kind of take away any stigma or kind of mystery about how that happens. And they also are there for support. So, somebody really just needs to talk. They need to be listened to. Maybe they need to create a pros and cons list. That's what SAFE is there for. And the difference between SAFE and some of our other on-campus resources is a couple. One, they're not professional mental health professionals or case managers like case management, like our folks in Title IX, like our counselors. So there is like a professional difference. They're also confidential. So if you disclose information to a SAFE, they are not allowed to, they're under a confidentiality requirement that does not allow them to share that information out, except in the cases of imminent danger to self or others, or abuse that is towards a child or elder, et cetera. So really they are a confidential resource. So unlike maybe reaching out to Title IX or CMDSS, which is going to support you just as well, SAFE can kind of talk through your options, your resources, you can share things with them, and that information just stays there. And they're really going to help you decide, like, is a private resource important, good for me? Would I rather a confidential resource like a community agency or a doctor or a counselor? So they're going to be able to help them navigate where to go next. And so that's kind of what SAFE does. And if students want to get involved with SAFE, as I'm sure there might be some young people in this incoming class that would be, we actually recruit in the spring. We recruit in the fall, we recruit in the fall. So when students come to campus, they're going to start learning about different student organizations that they can join. SAFE will be one of those. They'll go through an application process, an interview process, and then if chosen, they're going to get all of that really great training and support to handle those calls if they become a SAFE. So is that kind of what you wanted me to talk about, Penny?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, and if there's anybody that wants to add, like any campus partners that want to add kind of how they work with SAFE or how they see SAFE fitting into this, because I know they're very much like, they work with each one of these offices pretty closely and regularly, so.
And I will also add that one of the things that often happens in those first 4 meetings, the WAVE leaders that are the orientation assistants to the new students or the RAs, a lot of times they will say, take out your phone. We want you to program in the SAFE phone number so that you always have it, just in case you need it or you need that information for a friend of yours who might experience this. So we really do try to get that out there.
And I'll add, Penny, SAFE is actually the organization who delivers the kind of sexual violence prevention programming that we do during orientation. And what that looks like is an hour-long large group presentation and then an hour-long small group debriefing. And all of that is led by SAFE. So your students in the very first days that they're on campus, they're meeting SAFEs, they're hearing about the hotline number, and they're learning about it as a resource. That happens, that will happen the Saturday of orientation. So you don't have to be concerned about your young person kind of coming to school and not finding out about SAFE. They will meet SAFEs, they will talk to SAFEs, and they will learn about that resource in the first couple days that they're on campus.
And then I wanted to back up and just give a little bit more detail about the on-call person that Alison mentioned. So those people are the student affairs professional on call. So that is one of our full-time staff members who are people like the folks that are the presenters. And so they share that responsibility for the 24/7 on-call responsibility. And so that's a different group of people. So it's not trained student volunteers, it's full-time staff with expertise in this area and who know those different resources. Now, the other way to reach the student affairs professional on call would be to call our TPD emergency number and ask for that. They would know how to reach those people. So there's a lot of different avenues in to reach people who can be helpful. So the next set of questions that we kind of have several that are related to, do we keep statistics about the prevalence of sexual violence on campus? What's the frequency of assault incidents? Do students or parents have access to find out what cases have been reported? So I'll turn that over to our colleagues here to answer.
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle that one first. So yes, the answer is we do maintain statistics. There's 2 major ways that we do that. First is through climate surveys. So this is, you heard me mention that earlier. And like I said, we also did a webinar back in January about that. Although I realized I said earlier, some of you may have been on that. You wouldn't have been because you're new parents. I don't think you knew back in January that Tulane is where you were necessarily going to be. But I know that's available on Penny's website if any of y'all did want to go back and view that. So what a campus climate survey seeks to do is survey every single student in our community to find out about the incidents of things like sexual assault, intimate partner violence, stalking on our campus. It also, in addition to kind of trying to find out information about the incidents and details about the incidents themselves, we're also trying to gather some information about, did students who were impacted by sexual violence, did they access resources on campus? Did they find those resources helpful? It asks questions about knowledge and beliefs. So do students have an accurate knowledge of what consent is? Are they subscribing to rape myths? Like if someone comes over to your house, they're basically consenting to sex, right? Because that kind of information helps us know if there are knowledge gaps we need to target, or beliefs that we need to work on changing. So our climate surveys yield an incredible wealth of information for us. Our first comprehensive climate survey was conducted in 2017, and we released that data in 2018. And either me or one of my colleagues on here will drop a link to where you can look at that climate survey data. It's pretty sobering, I have to be honest. 41% of our undergraduate women reported experiencing sexual assault. 18% of our undergraduate men reported experiencing sexual assault. Those rates were even higher for members of our queer community, our LGBTQ+ folks. And so it was sobering statistics to see, although not totally out of line with what we see at some of our peer institutions who've also conducted climate surveys. But it also gave us a lot of good data on avenues that we could try to pursue for bringing down these rates. So what populations we maybe needed to put more resources and interventions towards, ideas for new interventions and programs that we could launch. And that is what resulted in All In, which Alicia spoke with you about earlier. It really was a catalyst for us making some changes and greatly expanding our response and prevention services on campus. We just conducted our most recent climate survey in January and February of 2022. So unfortunately, our analyst is still working on that data. I haven't even seen the complete data yet, so we're not at the point where we can even think about sharing it publicly yet, but we expect that we'll be able to do that in spring of 2023. So stay tuned. I'm sure you'll be getting communication about how you can plug into that data release. But in the meantime, you're welcome to review our 2017 data. The other major way that we track and share data with our community is tracking cases that are reported to the university each year. So how many students came forward to case management and victim support services and said, I was a victim of sexual harassment or sexual assault? And then how many of those cases fell within Tulane's jurisdiction? Because some of those students who come forward to us may have been harmed by someone who has no affiliation with Tulane, or they may have been harmed by someone in high school before they were even a Tulane student, but they still need support. So we are tracking pretty comprehensively how many victims come forward to the university each year. And then within that number, we're tracking how many of those fell under our jurisdiction. And generally those students, we offer to connect them with Dr. Zacharda in our Office of Student Conduct so that they can explore those formal and informal resolution options that Dr. Zacharda talked about. And so we also keep statistics then on how many cases went to a formal or informal resolution, what was the outcome, what percentage of cases did we find the respondent responsible for violating our policies or not responsible. We're often able to give a summary on the kind of sanctions that we implemented as well. And so that data release and presentation occurs annually at an event called Shifting the Paradigm. We have tentatively set the date of Shifting the Paradigm 2022 for September 26th. And so you and your students can also expect to hear more about that event as we prepare for that in the fall. And I know my colleagues all have really important roles in supporting our climate survey and in that collection of our reporting data each year. So if any of them would like to chime in, please feel free to.
The only other thing I'll add is there is one other place where some statistics live. And we also annually publish the annual security report, which is available off of our Tulane University Police Department website. And that is, again, a requirement from the Clery Act, from the Department of Education, and from the federal government. And so we report, or we publish that every year in about October. And that will give us the year's crime reports, crime statistics, which would include sexual violence as well.
So there's another question about whether we, if there's ongoing sexual violence prevention throughout a student's time at Tulane or just at first year students orientation. So that is what this list is about, that it's really ongoing. There's several different avenues through which this is presented. So sometimes it's within something like a special awareness month, which happens in April, or as was just mentioned, the Shifting the Paradigm is an annual program that happens in the fall. But the peer educators are constantly doing things. These staff members are doing outreach and programming within different realms. That might be through residence halls, through sororities and fraternities. Sometimes a professor might invite in one of these staff members to do something in their class. So it is ongoing. It's not just a one and done thing that happens during orientation week. It is really infused throughout many things. And I'll just reiterate what Julia said about the first climate survey was the impetus for All In to look at how it could be further infused and deeper and wider. So so I do want you to know that it's ongoing and kind of pitched at different levels and different ways for where students are in their journey through college. So another question is, what advice do you give students to avoid being a victim of sexual violence? I think that's embedded in so much of that that we do, but if somebody wants to tackle that question, I'll turn that over to my colleagues.
I'm happy to tackle that. Well, that's always a complicated question, because we can provide young people with some skills that really empower them in their relationships and their interactions with other people. But ultimately, we really want to ground ourselves in that the only person that can ever prevent a sexual assault from happening is the person responsible for it, which is the perpetrator of that assault, the person that is harming another person. And so while we do talk a little bit about risk reduction, and I can go into some of those risk reduction conversations we have, we overwhelmingly talk about how to not be a perpetrator of sexual violence by practicing healthy sexuality. So if you are interacting with somebody in an intimate or romantic way, how are you being attentive to both your boundaries, needs, desires, pleasure, comfort level, as well as your partner's? How are you accepting no's in a healthy way? How are you avoiding coercive behavior? So are you asking the same question multiple times? Are you bringing up past situations to try to convince somebody to change their mind in the current situation? These are all things that we're really trying to empower our students to understand what is a healthy behavior around relationships and sexuality, and what is an unhealthy, and then what is an abusive behavior. And so most of the work that we do really focuses on trying to give people like tools, skills, knowledge, and beliefs for them to practice healthy sexuality. Because ultimately we want to get to a place where no one is behaving abusively and then zero victims have to protect themselves. And again, we really know that sexual violence often happens between people that know each other, people that have pre-existing relationships. They're very complex situations. And so it is hard to explain to somebody, this is how you avoid maybe your trusted friend of many years from taking advantage of you in a vulnerable situation, right? We can't teach a victim how to prevent that, but what we can do is give that friend the skills to not take advantage of another friend when they're in a vulnerable situation. And so that's really the majority of our approach. And one way, and we really work to normalize amongst our students that your boundaries matter. Your comfort, your pleasure, your safety matters. And no, you don't owe anyone anything when it comes to your sexuality or your sex life. And so you get to ultimately make the decisions that you want. And anybody that's violating those decisions is behaving in a harmful and abusive way, and one that Tulane does not accept. And so that's really how we focus on that. And that's why so much of our sexual violence prevention work is giving people actually alternative skills and knowledge to practice healthy sexuality, because there is instances of sexual misconduct and sexual violence that are intentional, and that, it's hard to explain how some prevention education would avoid those intentionally harmful behaviors. But the vast majority of sexual assaults that we see are really when somebody isn't honoring or being attentive to their partner's boundaries, to their partner's consent, to their partner's desires. And we can correct that. We can give people the skills to be more attentive to that and show them that that's a requirement to be part of the Tulane community. So that's really where we focus our efforts in prevention. And if anybody would like to add on to that, please.
I think that was an excellent response, Jennifer. The only thing I would add is Tulane also does a lot of work to address alcohol and substance abuse on campus. And that is also, I think, an important strategy for trying to reduce the incidence of sexual violence. Let me be clear that we don't say to students, oh, if you don't drink, you won't get raped, right? We never want people to feel like it is their fault that they got sexually assaulted because another person took advantage of their incapacitation to commit a sexual assault. But at the same time, we know from research and from our own data, alcohol really fuels a lot of our sexual violence issues on campus. And so when we engage in efforts to try to address that behavior, it can also help to address some of the sexual assault that occurs on campus. And I won't go in depth on what that looks like because I'm pretty sure there is another parent webinar that gets into some of the alcohol prevention strategies. But I just want y'all to know, even though we don't always label that sexual violence prevention strategies, because we don't want people to feel blamed if they were drinking and or using drugs and got sexually assaulted, that is a way that we are also trying to reduce some of that incidence.
And I think I would just like to tell parents that I really believe that, you know, our staff here are using just a richer, more thoughtful approach to all of this that didn't exist when a lot of us were in college, and where the focus then might have been on self-defense classes and putting all the burden on victims or potential victims. This is much more nuanced and deeper and wider, that it looks at so many of these different things: healthy sexuality, boundaries, respect, you know, defining consent, defining enthusiastic consent. And it's just a different way to approach this whole issue. And I think it's greater, better education for students. And the information that we get from the surveys, then I think even taking the survey is an educational experience for a lot of students, because it kind of it clues them in to all the nuances of this issue, and it helps our staff then create more interventions and education. So there were a couple of questions that were specifically about the survey, so I'll ask those and let the panelists answer. How was the question in the survey asked? Victim of sexual assault, ever a victim, or merely while at Tulane? And I think Julia mentioned that before, but I'll pose that one to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide some clarification there. So in the 2017 survey, we asked folks about their experiences of victimization since they enrolled at Tulane. So that's where those numbers are coming from. It's what students have experienced since enrolling at Tulane. And you can look at our survey instrument even. I'll drop the link if you want to see exactly how we worded this. We used the gold standard in sexual violence research, which is asking these questions in a behaviorally based way. It's more likely to yield accurate data. For the 2022 survey, we made a few tweaks. We're still asking students, have you experienced sexual violence since enrolling at Tulane? But we added an additional question to ask about their experiences of sexual violence during adolescence, because we recognized anecdotally, we were seeing a lot of students coming into Alison's office or the counseling center or calling the SAFE hotline who had also had experiences of violence in high school. And I'm very glad that they were coming to seek services from Tulane. If that incident was still impacting them, they are definitely welcome and entitled to get support for that during their time here at Tulane. But we also know that a prior experience of sexual violence is a pretty big risk factor for future experiences. So we felt like that data was important for us to collect too, to figure out if that's maybe a population where we need to direct some additional resources. Because we know that they have heightened vulnerability. So we don't have that 2022 data back yet, but I know that's a new question that we asked that we're all pretty interested in seeing the answer for that, because it might point us in some directions where we need to put additional resources.
Thank you, Julia. Another question that I'll pose to you, someone asked, in the survey, what was the response rate? Can you clarify a little bit more about what that 25% meant? With roughly 25% of the respondents said they were victims of sexual assault, does that mean does that extrapolate to 25% of all campus students?
Right. So in that 2017 survey, we had a 47% response rate, which is a huge response rate for a survey of this nature. That was a really great accomplishment for us to get that many students to respond. But I think what this question is getting at is if only 47% of students responded, how can we be sure that that number is actually representative of the community? And so there's a couple ways that our super smart researchers and statisticians who help design all of this, there's a couple ways that they get at that. One is that we do go through our data to look at some of the different demographics and ensure that it's actually representative, that even if it is only 47%, does that 47% roughly reflect the demographics of our campus? And there are some statistical methods they can use to weight that data. If, for example, we find that, graduate students were slightly underrepresented in the survey. And our analyst who's working on the 2022 data did give me a preview a couple weeks ago with just a couple of just question top line numbers, where he was showing me the weighted data versus the unweighted data because he was parsing through those kind of questions. And we actually are finding so far with the latest survey is that the numbers don't even differ that much when we weight versus unweight for certain demographic factors. So what that means is that the sample we got seems to be pretty representative of our campus community. Another piece of research that's reassuring about these surveys being representative campus is there is a research study that was done, and I'm going to forget which university it was, where they essentially did an experimental study where they were able to compare students who responded to a climate survey with students who didn't respond to a climate survey to see if there was a difference in rates of sexual assault between those two groups. And what they found was there was no difference. So that also gives us some confidence that these samples aren't kind of self-selecting the people who have experienced victimization or have a strong opinion about this, that we are getting a pretty good cross-section of campus.
And Julia, one other question was, how did Tulane compare to its peers in the answer to the 2017 survey?
Yeah, that is a little bit of a complicated question because not all of our peers collected data the same way we did. Some of them structured their surveys to where they were only asking about students' experiences of sexual violence in the past year, not since they had enrolled at that university. Some of them, to be quite frank, were using instruments that weren't as robust as our instrument. So as I said earlier, the gold standard is that you ask a series of behaviorally based questions. So asking things like, has someone ever touched your penis, vagina, but I forget exactly the way it's worded, but when you were too incapacitated to consent to that behavior, rather than asking, were you ever sexually assaulted? We know from research that you're going to get more accurate data if you ask that behavioral question versus just asking someone, were you ever sexually assaulted? Unfortunately, some universities are still asking questions that second way, though. They're just asking their students, were you sexually assaulted? So it doesn't feel accurate to compare our numbers to surveys where the universities asked it that way. That being said, Duke University is one peer that had a rate extremely similar to ours. And I think they're a university that also just kind of shares some demographic characteristics with our community. So I think they're a good comparison for us. And more universities are doing these surveys. So it's great to have more schools that we can kind of look to. And one last thing I'll add is, in the latest reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which was passed this spring, the Biden administration did include language that in the next couple years, we're expecting they're going to start mandating that every university do a climate survey and that we all use the same instrument, which will make it easier to compare between schools. So more to come probably in the next few years as that gets developed.
And one other question was, how can parents access that annual report that's from the Clery Act? Chris, it's on the TUP website, as I understand. So,
yeah, we can, Chris or I can definitely drop that link in the chat.
So we'll start wrapping up now. And so I just wanted to tell you that we'll give you some some information, some follow-up kinds of things. So we will post on the parent program's website under the webinars tab links to these really wonderful guides that have been developed by some of the folks that you see here tonight. And so you can use these great resources to guide your follow-up conversations within your own family. So one is a parent guide, join the conversation, talking about sex and sexuality, and another is talking with your student about sexual violence. So I can't say enough about just how well designed these are to help you through these conversations and follow up on some of these different elements that you've heard about tonight. So keep that in mind. We'll have that available for you. And then I also just wanted to give you some other reminders that if you have feedback about tonight's webinar, you are welcome to email parents@tulane.edu. I'll see that and I'll send that on to whoever is appropriate, one of these panelists or someone else. Or if you have short comments that you'd like to just type into the question and answer field before we close, then you can type those in, just feedback about this topic and this actual webinar presentation. We will also have this recorded and make that available on the parent program's website. And then while I have some parents here, I would just like to remind you to use the official Tulane University resources for information and support. And so those include the emails from Tulane University departments that come to you directly or to your student, the parents.tulane.edu website, or for students at this phase, especially in their time at Tulane, orientation.tulane.edu. We have the Parents as Partners e-newsletters. The students are getting theirs called Navigators. We have some more Tulane Talks coming up. And then there are other topical webinars for parents on everything from move-in and shipping and mailing services to hurricane preparedness and advice about how to create that personal evacuation plan. So please pay attention to those different resources that we're providing. We understand that there are some Facebook groups out there for parents, but please remember that those are not official Tulane communication mechanisms. They are not moderated or guided by anybody here at Tulane. And sometimes there can be outdated information that's shared and that can get confusing for people. So if you're looking for official current information about procedures and policies, please look to these official sources through Tulane. And if you ever have any questions about any of those things, you can always email parents@tulane.edu and I will help forward that question to the appropriate resource. So the other thing that I'll just mention to parents is that we will have a new parent communication tool that will launch later this summer. So listen for more details about that. So we just want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. We're so appreciative for your interest in this topic. There will be 2 remaining topics in this Tulane Talks series. I apologize for the fact that we had a technical glitch and had to get some more information out to you about how to join tonight. And I will be sending out updated information about how to get registered for these 2 remaining topics in this series. You might want to note the date and time of the topics right now. It has been in the parent e-newsletters earlier. So save those dates. Please join us again. We'll be happy to see you on those different webinars. And we just want to thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for their time and expertise and concern and care about all of our community regarding these topics. And just thank all of you for being with us. And so just want to tell you to have a lovely evening. Thank you.